Good morning. Oh, good morning if you're in the UK. If you're not, I'm not sure. I see we have Saskia, Catherine, and Ratia. Hello, thank you for joining me live. I'm going to be waiting for Ben because he's running a little bit late today. Here in the UK, it's school holiday time. And so, managing or juggling, trying to keep kids occupied and entertained while doing the work, and that's the challenge of being a parentpreneur. Oh, hello Saskia, thank you very much for saying good morning. I hope you're well. I saw your messages on Mighty Networks, our community platform. Feeling the challenges that you were describing there. Hi Sam, and Nick's joining us, and Amit. Hello Amit. Welcome. We are today going to be doing a kind of a recap over this season of Waking Up to Money. There were a number of things that we were covering this season. One of them being how to price community memberships, which Saskia was a part of, I think. And then we have defining the value of your work with confidence. So this whole thing about being really confident about how you price and put a number to things that you're selling. We also covered this idea of making it easier for your customers to buy you. Sometimes when we just present an offer, it can be very difficult for customers to actually gauge what does that mean in terms of relative value. Is that the right amount of money? Maybe it's not the right time. And so being aware of how customers can get confused and how any confusion or uncertainty can put people off. And this idea of also pricing a new product or service. So something you create for the first time, you don't know exactly, you don't have some benchmark as to put a number on it. So how do you take that forward? How do you move forward with confidence without feeling like that finger in the air and that kind of the risk of rejection, or maybe pricing too high, or even worse, pricing too low? How do you navigate that? So we're going to be covering those ideas when Ben gets here. And so it's actually an opportunity for me to do a bit of a ramble. I see Emily. Oh, Ben's here. Sorry, I just didn't see Ben. Excellent. Oh, no, I was just about to do a ramble, my own little ramble. So I'm going to bring Ben on now and see how he's doing. Hi, Andrea. Please say hi in the chat. Good morning, Nick. Thank you for sharing. Well, making me feel not alone. Now I'm definitely not alone. Yay!
With loads of time spent. Look, my glasses are steaming up because I'm hot and sweaty. I don't know if people want to know that, do they?
Did you run back home?
I cycled home, and I cycled. It's very windy outside, and so I cycled. I was cycling from Kent Town, whatever, so 3 miles away, into the wind. And so it felt, so I'm now a bit hot and sweaty. Look, my glasses are still steaming up.
Talk about commitment. So everyone here, please give a round of applause to Ben for his commitment. Were you out in Kent Town for a morning swim?
I wasn't actually. I think I went for a walk and a walking meeting with Vicky, who might be listening or is not listening now, tends to consume these podcasts over her breakfast on catch up.
Nice.
So I had a walking, talking meeting on the seafront. It was very nice.
Oh, lovely. I think those. I prefer those, unless you need a flip chart and post-it notes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Which I think actually, in many instances, you can do without.
I do love a flip chart.
Yeah.
And I love my post-it notes. And I love.
Well, take them with you. You can take them with you.
But when we get to that kind of minority report stage of life, where you can have like an interactive screen just float in front of you, and you can start manipulating thoughts and ideas in real time, wherever you are. Anyway, that's just my own little.
It might disintermediate the being by the sea experience, though.
Oh, maybe you can blend it.
Blended reality. There's a whole new thing.
That's it. There's a whole new thing. I've got a startup if you want to invest in it. VR is where it is.
VR is where it's at.
That's
okay.
The next
Let's
big
do
thing.
this.
Yeah. Cool. So I don't know if you caught my mini intro. I was just letting people know that we're going to be doing a bit of a recap of the stuff that we kind of been covering over this last season, and also answering any questions that people may have. So if you have any thoughts or questions around those topics that I was discussing around pricing, community, kind of defining the value of what you do with confidence, making yourself easier to buy for your customers, or how to price a new product or service. If you'd like us to dive deeper into any of those topics, or you have a specific question around those, then feel free to post a question into the chat.
Unless they're listening on the podcast.
Sorry? Oh,
unless they're listening on the podcast.
Unless you're listening to the podcast, then you just ping us an email. Ping me an email.
We go.
Yeah, there we go. It's easy. It's
another
easy,
blended reality experience.
It is asynchronous blended reality. ABR. That is what we're going to be building. Doesn't matter where you are, when you are, who you are, or what you are, you will be part of our
this is big. Reality. This is big.
This is big. This is big. You know, Musk, Bezos, just out of the way.
Exactly. Moon men. This is not about the moon.
Exactly. Forget space. Forget Mars. Forget the moon. We will bring them here.
Yeah.
I'm going to blend those realities. So, thank you, Saskia. She likes our energy. She likes the way we just waste time talking about complete rubbish.
It's not rubbish. These are big startups.
Oh no, Saskia forgot her question.
That's the idea. That's why we do it.
I think we should just stay quiet for like 3 minutes while Saskia remembers her question, so we don't interrupt her flow of neurons reconnecting. No, it's too uncomfortable. I can't do it. I would not survive on a Vipassana. And you do your own little Vipassana. You do your mini Vipassanas. I do
minis.
Yeah.
Sitting, not talking is actually. I mean, I quite like not talking to other people. I know that sounds kind of a bit mean, but the not feeling compelled to talk to other people, like when you're in sort of, some sort of new social situation, having the sort of random stocking filler small chat, not having to do all of that is quite enjoyable actually. But then after several days of not speaking to other people, that's less enjoyable.
Well, for me, it's an invitation for all of the other voices in my head to pipe in.
That is unfortunately the reality. They're the voices who arrive.
Exactly. And I think that's kind of part of what I think this work is that we're doing about is there's those voices that we either forget about or suppress that tell us, oh, you can't do that. That isn't worth that. They're not going to like that. You're not good enough to do that. Why are you doing this in the first place? And essentially those bits of us that get in our way of actually creating the work and doing the work and creating the value that is important for others. I feel is I think what you talk about there, that silence practice, is part of the deeper work that underpins not just pricing but this whole entrepreneurial journey. And when we can be comfortable with those voices and those thoughts and ideas, or that just randomly pop into our head, I think that's an important skill that I think lots of people aren't aware of or just neglect.
Yeah. Well, I think we kind of avoid it, don't we? Because the getting that skill requires you to trundle over some uncomfortable terrain that it's easier to steer clear of. Yeah.
And so maybe that might be an interesting place to start, because though we could maybe talk a bit around these underpinning thoughts, beliefs, stories that really basically suppress the impact that we could make. Because we learn all this stuff, and they are useful tools, useful strategies, useful techniques. But whether it's in business or in pricing, it's like, but if we don't acknowledge some of the sort of the more fundamental things that might get in the way. We won't be able to take advantage of this new knowledge in the best way we can. I don't know. Is there any like big things that you think are just generally people basically get in their way, the obstacles?
Yeah, and this instance, we did when we had our conversation with Anne Miltonberg's community the other week. I think this question came up then as well, and I think one of the things I was talking about then was one of the big things which gets in our way is the kind of idea that we're not actually worth it. I think that probably is a big chunky one that's in the kind of in the way of lots of people. That feeling of not being worth it. And then I think the other one, which is sort of also comes up when we're running business, particularly relating to money, the idea that somehow the money is just all going to go away. So kind of feeling like, that it's kind of sort of perpetually slipping through my hands. So I'm not worth it, which kind of stands really square between me and being able to do good work for you. Because if that's the lens which I'm seeing through, whether clearly or not clearly, that affects how I do my work. It affects the work that I do. It affects that I feel about my work. So all of those things. So that's kind of undermining you wholly and completely. And then also from a kind of money stories point of view, the kind of feeling that that I never have enough. And so that also kind of eating away at the foundations of your good work.
Have you heard of the word teleology?
That's weird. I have heard of the word teleology, but it came up again yesterday. Is that linked? Is that from the word telos, which is about?
Oh, now you're quizzing me. I thought I was going to be really clever and say, "Oh, no, I don't know." So I'm going to tell you what it's about. What does telos mean again?
Is telos about endpoints?
Yes, I can. Yeah, the ultimate objective or aim. So, teleology, as I understood it, is you define something based on the outcome.
Right.
So the classic, an example that I read up on the interwebs was, our heart exists to pump blood around our body. The purpose is to pump blood, and so in the context of here, it's like these are when you're learning something new, creating a new behavior. We have these teleologies that can be obstacles in the way of a new behavior. So, for instance, business, the purpose, we create businesses to make money. That's my understanding of teleology. So that really then defines why I go into business. If I don't go into business, if I start a business and I don't make money, then it isn't a business. So that's a way of thinking about it. And so if I'm at the start, for instance, and I'm trying to work out what I'm trying to create, who I'm trying to create it for, I can't call it a business because it isn't making money, because I haven't found my customers yet. And so then that infects my mindset of how I'm going to work. So then we're talking to what you're saying is like a teleology is like my value, the value of my work is dictated by the price, for instance. Yeah. And so if the price isn't big, then the value of what I do isn't good, or if the price is small, then the value of what I do is not worth it, and it's somehow linked. And so I think for me, this kind of part of this shift that I'm been experiencing, and I think it would be valuable for others to experience, is like detaching this, what I do and the price. There's absolute number. If it's this, then it costs this. And how that could potentially free us from, for instance, my worth isn't to do with a number. I think is ultimately we're trying to. I think is the way I understand. My worth is to do with the person and the impact they're going to have in their lives, or what I do. And it is, and maybe there's a deeper thing about actually what is the value of a human being. We're all valuable in a certain sense, but then that's going down a rabbit hole, I think. But anyway, that was. I just wanted to bring in the word teleology.
Brilliantly done,
because I just learned it. But I see it in the way of these beliefs or these ideas, this kind of this model of this exists for this purpose. What are those obstacles? What are those ideas that we have in our heads that stop us from pricing more powerfully, not worrying about the money? Because the other thing was like when you were saying about the money's going to slip away, and for me, there's that. It's kind of an existential crisis of like, oh my god, if I can't, I won't be able to pay the bills, or I won't be able to do this, and suddenly, I can't do anything, and I'm helpless. How that can stop us from actually acting, which is ultimately the only thing we can do to, how can we act powerfully despite the adversity?
Yeah.
So that was just my little random rant based on teleologies.
Good.
We have a question here from Saskia. So she says it's a bit more about marketing, but let's see if we can help her. She thinks she's got her prices right, and she runs a community, Yowl, and she's got good products, but she needs to find new people. She's taken the ethical move pledge, so she doesn't want to have a scarce time, buy now or miss out kind of thing. And her energy levels aren't great at the moment, so showing up live is hard. So doing this kind of thing, I assume, is going to be challenging. She could do with some tips for a minimalist type of selling tool. So I think from my understanding here, the context is low energy, not wanting to manipulate people, but there's a need to sell. So given that context, what things could she try doing that feel possible, as I understand it?
Yeah. So I guess my first thought, and you will also have thoughts as well, Carlos, the first thing that comes to my mind is, our sort of biggest source, or one of our most reliable sources of future customers, is existing customers. So your existing customers might well, Saskia, be a route to other people like them. So finding ways of involving existing customers or people who know about you now to help point the way to other people, introduce you to other people, whether that's directly through kind of referrals, whether that's more informally just through kind of inviting people along, but trying to recruit the people who are already with you to help you find more people was one thought that came to mind.
Nice.
First voice the question.
Thank you, Ben. And anyone who's listening, if you can think of, if you've had ways of, or you've tried things out that are kind of low energy, maybe low exposure ways of selling, as way of, my sense is that whole thing of like, I don't have the energy to just like bang on doors or just start shouting out about stuff. How do I get people to feel the need to buy now if I'm not pushing it? And what it reminds me of is a post I did a few weeks ago around creativity and sustained creativity. I link the energy to do something to the enthusiasm we have to do it. And enthusiasm, I think, is also connected to creativity, where something's exciting, we're doing something that gives us energy and flow. And so there's this post from a woman called Kendra Patterson. She talks about sustaining a creative practice. And this is very much around just creating content, which ultimately, for a lot of people these days, creating content is marketing. And so she talks about the difference between resistance and forcing it. Resistance she defines as, this isn't good enough, this isn't the right idea, this might not work, I'm not sure if I've got this clear. And it's something that we always have to work through. If that is just part of the creative process. And if you don't work through that, you never actually create anything. But then there's another thing, is forcing it. And this is this sense of dread, this sense of real unreasonable pressure. You've got to come up with the idea tomorrow morning, because if you don't come up with the idea tomorrow morning, everything's screwed and we're going to die. And it's that real sense of like, oh my god, I've got to come with that creative idea in like 6 hours, if not. And how do you get creative in that space? But then you force it, and you try and do it. And actually, what that does, if you do that too many times, you just burn out. So there's this gap between moving through creative resistance and not forcing it, because if you go beyond forcing it, you burn out, and that's the danger. So in between, she had these two suggestions of what you could do to not essentially get to a state where you can't act anymore because you have no energy. First one was a simple one, which I think a lot of people struggle with, particularly if you've got a deadline. Is just like, stop, just take a break, just take time out, and just go and sit with the scary voices.
not our scary voices.
Yeah, and just try and let yourself free yourself from the pressure, and that's when potentially new ideas will come up. The other thing was like, it felt like a bit of sort of sidestepping the issue. It's like, if you're finding it difficult to do it one way, I just can't. I don't want to do webinars or lives or whatever it is. Finding a creative process or a creative approach that you love doing, you enjoy doing. I love sketching, drawing. Unlike you, Saskia, I find it hard to write. I prefer to talk. So how can you? What is that thing that you just like? Can you knit something and take a picture of it and share it or something like that? Is like, what is it that you could just do for the sake of doing it because you find it fun and interesting, as a way of just overcoming that resistance, sidestepping the thing. So, what are creative ways that you could sell that might not be orthodox, might not feel like, oh, that's definitely going to lead to a sale, but actually just feels like fun and just generate some energy for you. So that's kind of like an idea that might help. I'm not sure, but it definitely is something that resonated for me in terms of getting past a creative block.
Yeah, I like that as well. I like because the thing that was sort of coming to mind as you were talking there was, one that thought, actually, what are the things which do energize you? So doing the things which do energize you. And actually the other thing which you were alluding to there, in making sure you use your sort of skills and capabilities. So, like Saskia, in your case, we all know you sort of, sketch and draw so well, how to use those things as, to doing more of the things you enjoy doing and finding ways of kind of using those things to work for you. And actually, I was kind of reminded also of some of the conversations we've had with people on the kind of pricing course, where you're talking to coaches, for example. And the thing that was coming to mind as you were talking there, actually, because, like what we're interested in where people are talking around pricing is using the questioning approach and making sure you're taking time to understand your client or your customer's motivation. And a similar kind of thing, actually coaches are equipped with all of the kind of questioning skills, the conversational skills to draw out that insight, to draw out the understanding. And the reason that sort of came to mind as you were sort of talking before, actually, which maybe links to the Kendra Patterson thing, is actually, just knowing the things that do energize us, using the skills that we have and turning those up more so that we use those things more, rather than feeling like I somehow need to put on a completely different set of clothes, which are not kind of comfortable and don't really fit, because they're the things that I need to do marketing or to do selling or to do pricing. It's never going to happen, is it? Actually, we're only ever really usefully going to enjoy doing the things we enjoy doing. So how can we turn those things to our advantage?
Nice. I like actually what you said about the questions. Is like, rather than asking the question, do you want to buy this? It's like, how can Saskia combine the creative aspect, part of what she does, or her creativity, to just send out questions to her audience and people out there? It's like, what are the questions that you feel that people need to ask themselves? Because I think, my understanding of her work is like, it's a means to an end. This learning how to knit was really about becoming pardon me if I got this wrong, but I remember this is about knitting, but it's also around mindfulness. It's about that process of connection through craft, through being with this thing that you're making, and then how that could shift in your world. I wonder if there's questions around that you could illustrate with pictures or things that you have that, you said it is a potential. She's mentioned it's more a bit about marketing. It's like marketing can be that way of just posing questions to people that get them to think and get them to understand what are the important things that they need to ask themselves.
Yeah, being in conversation.
There's so in hopefully in October on our Friday Fireside, I'm going to have a guy called Tad Hargraves, who is he runs this YouTube channel called Marketing for Hippies, and I was chatting to him this week over WhatsApp, and he was talking about this whole marketing thing and selling, and how a lot of people just get it wrong. And he got it down to like there's the problem, the premise, and the promise. So the promise is I've got this. It's going to turn this. It's going to make your life better. It's going to, it's got this feature, that feature, and it's the product. It's all the what of what you're selling. And most people just focus on that, and they're just like, all right, I got this, buy it. I got this. It's going to make your life better, buy it. And he says what we don't focus on enough is the problem and the premise. Ultimately 5% of our time should be on the promise. Most of our time should be all right, really defining the problem. And the premise is what's the context? What is the situation you're in? What the situation I'm in? How does that relate to you? What are the challenges around it? And always talking to that. And that's made me things like with Saskia is like, yes, the pricing is right and you want to convert people, but maybe what you just need to double down on is the problem and the premise, and using this creativity, these questions and sketches to just play with that.
Yeah, I like that. I like the way of clarifying that as the problem and the premise. I was thinking about, I was talking to another client of mine, and he makes music samples, right? So sort of selling samples, and he's been doing it for a number of years. There's quite a few people who are sort of in his orbit, but I was trying to sort of find out from him why people would buy them, right? So is it because I'm kind of making music and I need to put it in now? And one of the things I was kind of looking at, and I'd also been thinking about this in the context of people who write books, and I was trying to get my head around like why do you buy them? And like I buy quite a lot of books. Like I think I read a lot of books, and so I was trying to understand this kind of this kind of the kind of what the kind of inciting event is that would mean that I buy. So that kind of, in his words, I guess, the kind of problem and the premise. And I looked back over all of my Amazon purchases over the last 10 years, because I was just kind of really curious, like to see whether I could sort of understand. And I was really struck by the number of books that I bought that I'd never read. And I think that I read quite a lot, but really I bought loads of books that I never read. So clearly there was something about what the book promised and the premise of that time, that there was something around the idea of that book, I guess in a way that we talk about on the course. There was something around a good feeling or some sort of solution that it promised that really just linked to the premise, which is all now sounding sort of getting confused with the P words, but this thing. So really understanding that sort of context, the premise of what's going on, because I guess that is the condition, isn't it? That's the conditions from which somebody chooses to buy something, because they are choosing to change something. And so whether it's community, whether it's product, whatever it might be, the expression of buying it, like me with the book, the expression of buying it is my attempt to change a condition somehow.
Yeah. For me, there's something around, I like that idea. I should look into my book lists. But there's like, in a sense, there's an underlying theme maybe as well that we spot. We talk about this in kind of product design, is like the context and the needs, the needs and the wants of a customer. And so for me, there's an underlying theme of just this understanding of what's beyond the money making in a business, and what are the kind of the shifts that need to be made around thinking the way we think in order to act with less inhibition, for instance, and more clarity. And so a lot of the books I have around like psychology and kind of a bit of spirituality and kind of just new agey kind of looking at the world. And so those are the themes that attract me. Like you said, when I now look through the books, those are the things that I would, I'll need to learn about that at some point.
Or now I've learned because I bought it.
Yeah, I'll add that to the list and then totally forget about it for a while. But there is a journey that I'm on.
Yeah.
And so if we can identify those journeys that our customers are on, and that basically there's a kind of real big arc of transformation. It's like I want to get to a place where I'm getting paid for being me. I'm making an impact because the world of business is shifting to something that's a bit more less transactional and feels like it's adding to the world rather than taking away. And it feels like all in flow. It's joyful. And so then, if anyone's going to say, all right, come to this retreat, there's someone in our communities doing this retreat, this adventure in Iceland, where you get to see the Northern Lights, and then you get to hang out with
lights of your
people.
mind.
Exactly. And that for me is like, hit Northern Lights, hits that whole button, like, just big world shit.
Yeah.
And then hanging out with a bunch of people talking about just the way we think, nonviolent communication, storytelling is like, yep, I need to know about that. And I've never been to Iceland. Now I'm just going to convince myself it's worth $3,500.
Yeah.
But it's already. I kind of like saying, the outcome I want to create in my life is encapsulated there. And now there's the resistance. It's like, what's stopping me? It's like, oh, well, I've got family to deal with, so will they let me go? And okay, there's a lot of money, but what will I actually get out of that? And what will probably help is someone just talking to me, just like to work through that. And maybe I don't get to a place where, I'm going to go, but actually I'm in this state of like a bit confusion, uncertainty. It feels like it's for me, but can I justify it? How do I do that? And that for me is essentially what's important for a salesperson, isn't to say buy it now, buy it now, buy it now. If you don't buy it in the next 10 minutes, you're going to lose it. It's helping me understand what's in it for me. Yeah.
And I think there's an interesting, kind of really interesting thing around selling here with this, because like I think using artificial kind of tactics or using tactics which feel artificial to try and compel somebody to buy, I totally kind of get that. But equally, there is a thing around selling like what you're talking about there. Well, there is a time-bound thing anyway with Iceland, so that's a slightly different thing. But equally, it is also our job as salespeople to kind of paint a picture of a future that the person can enjoy by sort of coming on our trip, joining our community, whatever it might be. There does need to be a future state, and in some form, all of the forces of inertia are always working against you if you're selling a community or whatever it might be. So there are always many reasons why it is not a good time for somebody to do it. There's many reasons why I could tell myself, now's not a good time to do Iceland, family's not right, or now's not a good time to join this community, I'm already spending on this or that. So there are many, many forces in the world which are swimming against your tide when you're trying to sell something. And so there is a responsibility on the person who is selling, which can be from a place of positive intent. It can be from a place of generosity. Equally so, there is a responsibility on the person who is selling to kind of create the scenario, to create the story where I do feel it's important to act now, because otherwise they just won't act.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, and for me, maybe it kind of feels like what the intent is. If my intent is I'm just trying to make you do this, clearly that's a kind of negative thing. If my intent is generous and my wish is generous, then that's a kind of completely different place from which to start, even though we want to get to the same sort of end place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think with Saskia, it's like, how do you create that sense of urgency with integrity?
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like, oh, it's just a hack or a tactic.
Yeah.
And one thing that springs to mind is that piece is like, there is someone out there who just finds it really difficult to make up their mind. It really is important for them to work with you. It really is the right time, but there is some kind of mental aikido or just some kind of mental nudge they're needing, a simple nudge they're needing, and it could be just a deadline, because that helps them think, okay, shit, I need to do it now. I need to do it now, because that's a simple, a simple way for them to understand that they need to act now.
Yeah. Why now is an important question that we should ask about a lot of our work, really.
Yeah.
If we're trying to, why now?
Yeah.
And actually, if we can't answer the question why now, then why can they answer the question why now?
Yeah. And it's tricky as well when it's a message that's going out to many people. I think if we're talking one-to-one with a person, then it's easier. Well, you don't necessarily need it's the deadline is next week or the deadline is tomorrow, because you can be in conversation and you can work out what's getting in the way and what are the time pressures that they're under, or what the absence of time pressures, for instance, they seem to feel they have. But when it's like spread out, Saskia, if you're talking to lots of people in your newsletter or people on social media, it's hard to know who fits into that category of I need the push. And so it is like, for some people, it'll need to be a date. For some people, it need to be a story. For some people, it need to be something else. And maybe it's just accepting that for some people, that date thing was just like, oh, yeah, whatever. I'm just going to switch off because it's too much pressure for me. In a sense. But then for others that you don't know that are out there that might need to say, oh God, yeah, I forgot about that. I need to do that right now. And that's a way to rethink it rather than thinking it's an underhand tactic. Yeah. And I think this all comes down to maybe one of the other core teleologies.
Nice. Twice. That's twice.
I'm gonna milk that word for all it's worth. That was like at least 10 minutes on Wikipedia trying to work out what it meant. But that whole thing about selling is underhand. Selling is mainly a manipulative practice.
Yeah.
And that that's not a good thing to have in your head.
No, selling has got a really bad press, I think.
Yeah.
And mainly because it's been kind of ill used. But it's like, for me, it is simply, you need to paint a picture of a future state that benefits your clients or customers, whatever. And then selling is the process of working out how you get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for people who are more creative, and this goes back to the Kendra post, because there's a bit of a conflict around doing something with integrity and you're feeling right now and you're energized to do it right now, versus how do you consistently sell something? You need to make a revenue of X amount each month. So you need to be hitting these targets each month. And so you need to be having a process in place. But what happens on a Tuesday when you say, I can't be asked? I need to send out that Instagram post, but I can't be bothered. And I think there is a real fundamental question there around how do you want the money to flow through your business? Do you want it to do that? Or, like I would say some artists, whether you're a painter or a singer, it does this. It's like maybe 1 year, hundreds of thousands. And then for 5 years, you're finding yourself in India to try and get a new kind of creative spark or something like that. And there it's a case of accepting that actually don't force the flat income thing. Just manage the peaks and troughs in a way that works best for you, maybe. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a couple of thoughts come to mind. One, I think, artists or not, the idea of that, of course, nothing is ever that, is it? And actually, it's our expectation of that which creates the stress when the reality is that.
Yeah.
Irrespective
or the hope for the hockey stick growth.
Yes, That's actually the thing, isn't it? Yeah. So basically, people don't know that they hope for that. It's like everything's about that, but of course, nothing's about that, or very rarely. But the only thing that is like that is accounting tricks, because that's basically what that's kind of big companies show that, but mainly through how they do their accounting. And other things, obviously, but yeah. So kind of getting comfortable with that, I think, is really, and I think kind of getting comfortable with flow, like you were talking about how the money is going to flow through my business. So kind of accepting that it does that. So if I accept that it does that, how is it that I want to work? What role does the work play in how I do my things, and how do I set myself up so that it kind of maximizes the ease with which that happened? Like I was talking to somebody on our momentum course for pricing, and they had kind of noticed that they had said in their kind of notes of things that they were aiming for, that they wanted to have 6 months of billings for their agency. And the question in my mind actually is, do you want 6 months of billings, or do you want 6 months of reserves? Because actually 6 months of billings feels secure, but actually what it also is doing is, actually that's not necessarily the easeful creative place they also want it to be. That's actually a commitment to do a load of stuff which they may not kind of want. Whereas if I have 6 months of money to pay for everything in the agency, now we can operate from a place of creativity. We can operate from a place of a bit more ease, because I'm less worried about tomorrow or these kind of things. So, I think that links to your idea. What actually is it that we want here, and how do we set things up that best facilitates that?
Yeah. And I think there's that. So on one hand, so going back to what you said before about these ideas that underpin how we work with pricing. If you have that feeling of like, as soon as the bank balance does that, you're like, oh, God, like panicked. Or even if the bank balance does that, it's like, yes, I'm a winner. That's great. It's like, actually, how do you not get so attached to those, how that looks on your spreadsheet? But then there's also this idea of like, how how your creative flow is influenced by the flow of money. Because if they are really linked because of the anxiety and because of the fear, then what does that mean? When the money's going down, that's when you need to be most creative to find out what the next thing is. So unless you can decouple that, then you're always going to feel in that space of like anxiety. Which I remember as an agency, it's like, yeah, we won a big business, we won a big contract. Yeah, we got paid our first deposit. Yeah, we got the next deposit. Oh shit!
The next one.
The contract's going to end in about 3 months.
Run for the hills!
It's like, oh my God! I need to build this product at the same time, find some new work, and now I'm panicked and stressed because the money's going down. It's like, it just did not make for a nice place to be.
No.
And so I think there's a lot to be said for a course on being more mindful with that journey of money and the peaks and troughs. And maybe that's more of what we can talk about and just help share people's stories around this and find some different ways of, or actually find people who are living that world. And how they're coping with the peaks and troughs. Because I think when we can do that, then we can design the businesses that align with our creative flow rather than the accountant spreadsheet. Yeah.
And maybe a useful kind of place to conclude is the thing that I'm reminded of when you say that is the archetypal modern day philosopher, the football manager, who after each match when interviewed, we were like, no, you don't get too excited. You don't get too excited about the wins. Don't get too down about the losses. Basically, hold the line. So clearly, all roads point to the wisdom of the football manager.
Boom. Lawrence will love that one. You heard it here. Be more Southgate. That's all it is. It's all it is. I think. Can you just like do some photoshopping of him and Buddha or something like that?
Exactly.
And then we'll know. We have the answers here. Awesome. Well, I hope, Saskia, that has been useful, and you've got some thoughts and ideas for doing marketing that's matching your energy at the moment. And thank you, everyone else who listened in and lent us
And
your
we'll
ears.
listen over their breakfast.
And for those of you listening over your breakfast, we
Or
appreciate
lunch.
your attention and your clicking on the download button on whatever podcast channel you have. Cool.
There you go. Look, we've got Johan Cruyff in there as well.
Oh, every disadvantage has its advantage. Boom. What a way to end. Thank you very much, Saskia. Awesome. Thanks a log.
Always thank logs.
I love thanking logs. You'll need to, if you're listening to the podcast, you have to check out the chat. You'll know, go to the Crowdcast, check out Saskia's chat, and you'll know what we're talking about here. Cool. Well, last episode of this season, we're going to take a break for August, and we will back in September. And yes, we'll be exploring more of these pricing ideas, and we will be doing a new course of the Happy Pricing course around about October time. So we'll be talking more about that come autumn. So until then, enjoy your summers. Those of you who are able to enjoy them, have fun.
We can all enjoy them. We just might not be able to go anywhere.
Oh, God. I've got a friend who's supposed to go to Portugal, got to the Euros tunnel Monday and got turned back because the son needed a PCR test.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
You know, both parents double jabbed. They thought, okay.
How old is the son?
12.
Yeah, it's 11 above.
Didn't realize.
Oh, what a total killer.
Exactly. Yeah, that wasn't a great start to holiday. So wishing you none of that, all of you. Enjoy, enjoy. Hopefully you have a nice restful and restorative break if that's the time of year for you. Nice one, Ben.
Thank you very much.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.